in their own time. Yeah, so thanks everyone for coming. We're gonna share some of the results. Let me share my screen just to follow up in the agenda. Um, Hi, Angela.
Hello.
Hey, Luke, Craig. Nice. We're getting a good crowd.
I just added the agenda in the Softgov channel from your post, Livy.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I thought I added already, but that's great. Thank you. So yeah, just going over a little bit of what we're going to be doing today, and then I'll pass to Sean to get us started. So we'll have sharing about the praise analysis tools and findings. So what was all the process like, and what are some of the findings that we have to make informed proposals now? And then I'm going to explain what is the decision-making process that we came up with, that we collectively decide that it would be a good idea to use in this case, and what is the problem set we're working with. And then we'll have an open sharing, and we're going to try to keep this open sharing for what are possible solutions. So not discussing the process or the validity of the process or what happened so far, but moving forward and based on all the findings that we're going to see from Sean, what are some of the solutions we can think of? And then if we have extra time, we'll hack a little bit on proposals because the token log set is open already. So with that, I'm going to pass to Sean. Are you ready?
Hey everyone, yep. So what I want to show off is deployed online. We have two apps. I'm super glad Octoupus just jumped in here. Octoupus and I have been putting in a lot of work on this over the past 6 weeks or so. It's been a joy. I think the results have gone certainly beyond my expectations. I think beyond most people's expectations. It was really nice to see some very strong data scientists come together. Octoupus and Mohammed have been incredible. I think we've all the three of us have been kind of pushing each other to have deeper insights and just go outside of our comfort zones in terms of what we've been putting together. So it's honestly been such a treat and a joy of a project to work on this. That being said, there's so much happening these days that Octoupus and I haven't really had a chance to sync up the last few days. So I think we both have some results. And so maybe I'll just open the floor for a few minutes to get started to welcome Octoupus, and we'll take a few minutes to sort of live coordinate here on the spot. I'm going to go over the interventions, the UBI interventions, and the wage deduction intervention particularly. And then there's also a really cool clustering dashboard that Mohammed has put together. And he also did the work on the praise bucketing. So I don't think that's necessarily been deployed, but I think we can just bring up the chart, the bar plot of the categories, and talk about that a little bit. So that's what I have on my end. And Octoupus, I'll just invite you to share kind of how you want to play off of that, and if there's any particular results that you want to go over as well.
Yeah, I think the main things that I ended up figuring out were the different measures of decentralization, and thanks to Griff and Zeptimus, I think I was able to get some good information about comparing these things to different other crypto projects. So rather than like comparing them to Switzerland or something. And I think that helped me understand more context for the different metrics. I guess my big conclusion is compared to other early crypto projects that I looked at, the distribution of impact hours tends to look fairer and more evenly spread out. So that was interesting, that looking at it from that different lens was also helpful. I made a YouTube video about it. I don't actually have the ability to share my screen, and the YouTube video ended up being longer than I wanted to, but it goes more into details. The other thing which I could pull up to share is I really focused on meetings and retweets because that was something that people seemed very interested in, and I might be able to share that after. I can go after you go, that's fine, or whenever, but the major difference between what I did and what Sean and Mohammed did was, especially Mohammed was working with the labeled data and using the hand labels, which were more accurate. And I was using sort of a coarser approach that just tried to catch retweets and meetings based on what I thought they might look like. So where we're getting our numbers from is a little bit different, but the numbers ended up looking similar. So it was a confirmation that they're probably close to the right numbers.
Just before we move forward, if anyone has any questions, you can post in the agenda doc and then we can start addressing them there.
Awesome, thanks, Livy. And I see Mohammed also just joined in the call. So, Mohammed, I'm going to go over the interventions dashboard. Do you want to talk a little bit afterwards about the clustering results and the dashboard that you've produced?
Yes, of course.
Awesome. Okay, so I think I'll go ahead and share my screen here. Okay, can everyone see this?
Yes.
Cool. So this app is available. It's online. It's praisedistributions.heroku/app. I think it's should be, praise analysis. It's the top link there. I'm also just running it locally right now. I just cloned the repo and ran it locally. And for anyone who's interested in doing that, it's super easy. You just install the requirements. So, okay, here I am in the repository. So there is this file requirements. There's no requirements file. Okay. Anyways, I'll just show you. You go into the UBI app, and the panel to run it is panel-serve.py. It's on the README, and I think we have to add a requirements file. But so if you want to run this locally, it's very responsive. It runs very fast. It's a little bit slower on the deployed version, but it works fine anyways. So we have the deployed version here and my local version. So I wonder if I can zoom in a little bit. Okay. So here I've put 3 interventions together in a dashboard. So we can toggle these off, and here we have the default praise impact hours distribution. So the x-axis is the rankings of people. It's sort of the ordering. So number 0, index 0, is the person with the most impact hours. And then it goes on this way. There's about 385. This isn't the very most latest data set. So there would actually be quite a few more impact hours and more people in the latest data set. We didn't quite get a chance to sub out, but this will give you an idea of what's available, and we'll sub in the latest data set, like probably just after this call, on the deployed dashboard, so you can go ahead and play around with it yourself. Over on the right here, we have let's see, did I modify this? Oh, I didn't. Okay, so these are just the top 10 impact hours. So number 1, there's 603, and without any interventions, the top impact hour holder holds about 6%, 6.5% of the total distribution. We get a Gini score of 0.57. Now, the Gini coefficient is a measure of equality that's generally applied to sort of nation-state economies in terms of measuring the distribution of wealth. And the lower the Gini score is, the more you have an equal society where wealth is widely distributed. And the higher, and it goes between 0 and 1. So as it approaches 1, you would have an extremely high concentration of wealth in a small number of people. So using this metric, it's a little bit of a red flag for our economy, because generally for a government or a nation economy, it's considered good to have a Gini score below 0.4. A Gini score below 0.4 would be considered sort of a highly equal opportunity government, and or not government, but economy. Octoupus is going to go into this quite a bit deeper and talk about different metrics and how we should be comparing apples to apples, because comparing the distribution of a crypto token to the distribution of wealth in a nation doesn't really make that much sense. So we have some better metrics to look at, but this is a good starting point. And we can see how this changes as we apply different kind of interventions here. Here we're looking at UBI hours. For anyone who doesn't know, UBI stands for Universal Basic Income. So this is the idea of, let's just give a constant amount of hours to everyone who's participated in the TEC. So everyone who's registered, anyone who's been dished praise ever should get a base level of tokens. And that will smooth out the distribution a little bit. So let's take a look at that here. We can apply the constant UBI intervention. And so this is set to 5 hours. So let's see. Okay, so you can see how this, just ignore this bottom distribution for now. You can see the entire distribution goes slightly up and down as we toggle this on and off. You can see the Gini coefficient goes from 0.57 to 0.52, and then you can increase the number of basic impact hours. And so we see that around the 21 hour mark, we break through that threshold of having a 0.4 Gini coefficient. So we could give out 21 impact hours to everyone and say, hey, look, we're a really equal opportunity economy. And yeah, so you can explore this. We could give out 100 UBI hours to everyone. We could give out 1 hour. And I think, I'll give a little bit of my subjective experience working on this dashboard. I feel like anywhere from 0 to 25 hours could be reasonable for people to make proposals of solutions. That's just my intuition. I do feel like it's reasonable to use this intervention, but I've also heard a lot of really great positions from community members who say this is not what we want, or if we do want it, it should be a very low number. And it's definitely worth hearing out those opinions because they have a lot of good points. So we can turn that off and we can say, okay, maybe we don't want to just airdrop everyone free tokens, is what some people would say. And so maybe we want more like a targeted UBI and something a little more sophisticated than just a completely equal distribution to everyone. So I came up with this idea. Actually, me and Livy were brainstorming and we came up with this idea of a sort of normal distribution, like a bell curve shape, to reward like the middle class hatcher. So what I did is I took the average number of impact hours. Actually, what I did, I dropped off this long tail. Basically, 50% of hatchers have 3 hours or less. So I actually dropped those off out of the calculation. And then for the top 50%, I took the geometric mean. Let's just call it the average number of impact hours, which is 43. So it's right around here. And I created this normal distribution. This is called the Gaussian function. It's the shape of a bell curve. And I center that at the mean, so at 43 hours. and then we apply the UBI to the peak of the center of that distribution, and we have this sort of decaying functionality from there. So we're not going to give extra hours to the people who already have the most hours, and we're not going to give extra hours to people who have 4 or 5 hours. But everyone else in this middle class, people who have around 25 to 50 to 60, 70, 100 hours, we're going to give them a bonus to sort of, yeah. So we'll see what that looks like. We can apply the Gaussian UBI. And yeah, so that changes the Gini coefficient. I have it set to 15. We can, I also have this, which is the spread. So we can target it more around that center, or we could flatten it out. And we can increase it like so. And we could, so it can really become visible if you make it quite sharp and make it quite high. But there's one property that I think we should maintain, is that we shouldn't change the ordering of impact hours. So I don't think we should ever have like this decreasing slope as we move to the left, because that's actually changing the ordering of people. So if we keep this low enough and we kind of spread it out enough, then we get this property of that it does not change the ordering. So yeah, so we can see, and this is available. You can play around with this and see what numbers are right. I think something around 0.02 and 20 hours looks pretty reasonable. And you can see the clear difference that it makes. It really buffers this center area here of hours. And then maybe we could do a combination. So maybe we could give everyone an extra 3 hours, and we could give a extra 20 hours at the very center of the average, and we get our Gini coefficient down to 0.46. And we've also got a calculator here that says the total number of extra hours that we're distributing. So if we give 3 constant UBI, then that's an extra 576 hours and an extra 2,321 from the Gaussian distribution. So that would be an extra 2,897 hours total. And you can see how this changes the percentage of the top contributors. So without any interventions, the top contributor has 6.5% of total voting power. And if we apply these two distributions here, then it doesn't change that much really, from 6.5% to 5%. So now the final thing that I have going here is the wage intervention. And this one's pretty cool. So currently the wage deductions on paid workers is at 85%. And with this we have the ability to scale that back. So eventually redistributing those hours. And so we can see what this looks like is just all the spikes here are the paid workers. And we can see what would happen as we give them back the deduction. So if we reduce the deduction from 85% to 50%, let's see, and we have some metrics here. So with the current deductions, we have 6,044 hours, which were deducted. And this could be a bit more sophisticated. I just made a simple ballpark. I said an hour is worth 50 wrapped X time. Maybe that's a bit high. But if we just run with that, then we times this by 50. So we say total wages deducted are about $302,000. So it'd be interesting to see how that compares with the actual operating budget that's been performed. And as we decrease those deductions, we can see that goes down. So we could give people back 35% of the total of what's been deducted from them. So it would be a deduction of 50%. And that would reduce the deducted impact hours from 6,044 to 3,929. And we can see here where the paid workers fall along this chart. And what I found really interesting is that if we don't deduct any impact hours from the workers, the Gini coefficient actually increases. So we're ironically kind of creating a more wealth concentration. I guess this makes sense, right? The stewards and the paid contributors are kind of at the center of, they're quite high on the distribution anyways. So by having these deductions on impact hours distributed, we are actually creating a more equal distribution. But like I said, this Gini coefficient, don't get too attached to it. It's just a number on a screen. It's take it with a grain of salt. I think it's nice to have this number, this metric that ranges from 0 to 1, but we'll hear from Octoupus some insights on alternative metrics. So yeah, I hope this is enough to give people the confidence to go and play around with this tool and think about how we have these three sort of independent distribution interventions that can be applied individually, or they can be applied together. And yeah, and that's that for this sort of intervention dashboard on the distributions. So I think I'll pause there and open the floor. Maybe Livy, do you want to, or does anyone have questions or?
No, I would like. Oh, Octoupus just jumped in. I think this is so wonderful, the dashboard, and it will help a lot with making the perfect proposal or playing around and visualizing that. I think there was also some of the categories, discoveries that could be interesting to share. Octoupus, if you would, if you like.
Okay. Let me share my screen. Hold on one.
If you want, I can help to share screen.
Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Can you hear?
Yes.
Okay, so I tried to dive. One question that kept coming up repeatedly was about the value of retweeting and the value of attending meetings. So I tried to dive deeply into those questions. I only looked at data from period 7 to period 17 because that was when the Discord server existed for the TEC and when the same quantifier system was used through all of those periods. The impact hours for retweeting. So this is not actually impact hour per retweet. This is impact hour for a praise that mentions retweeting, which could potentially be multiple tweets. But all told, the average impact hour was 0.54 impact hours for such a praise. And they constituted about 4% of all the impact hours that were awarded during this time. And I did clean this, so this number is accurate because some of the retweetings were bumped higher because the quantifiers were actually giving values for something else. I went through and adjusted it so that all of the retweeting praises received the value they should have gotten, which was based on the most frequent for their period and for retweeting. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that number is accurate. And there was a lot of variability in terms of how much value retweeting praises got. So you can see In 8, there was nothing, but like in period 7, there was between 0.2 and 0.3 impact hours, about 0.25. And then in period 14, they were highly valued at over 0.8 impact hours. So there was a lot of variability there. And I thought, well, maybe they were like a constant percentage of the impact hours per period, but that varied quite a bit. Some quantifiers collectively thought they were worth about 2% of all the impact hours that were awarded. Some thought they were worth about 10%. So that's retweeting. And then the other major category I looked at was attending meetings. And this was harder because there wasn't a standard keyword like retweeting. So I made 2 lists of keywords. List 1 was coming, joining, attending, attendance. Hey, Maddie, can you give me 1 moment?
Yes, for sure.
I need you to hold on 1 moment, okay? So there are these 2 lists, and if you hit 1 word, at least 1 word from each list, I counted it as a meeting. So this caught basically the things that it should have. It wouldn't catch something like showing up for today's research working group, but it does not catch hosting a party. And then there were some things where it was like praise for doing X and Y and attending a meeting, and X and Y were really big deals. So that made some of these praises be really high, and I was not able to accurately separate those, but I just saw that there weren't that many of them. But that did drag the average a little bit higher. The average number of impact hours for the meeting praises was 1.14 impact hours. And the median, which might be more accurate because of the high outliers, is 1.0. So roughly speaking, during this period that I looked at, praises for attending a meeting was worth about 2 praises per retweet in sort of typical values. So I estimate based on this that if you attended 1 meeting per week during this January to May period, you could earn somewhere between 12 and 20 impact hours for those praises. There was, again, a lot of variation of average impact hour value based on the period. Some of this might be due to the more important praises that we talked about, where you were actually doing multiple things. Some of it is probably due to natural variation between quantifiers. So based on this, I would estimate that about 15% of all of the impact hours that were awarded that could be given a direct reason were due to retweeting or attending a meeting. This matches with the number that Mohammed was getting. His number was slightly higher, but it was based on the sample, and our numbers are comparable for that. I think his was like 18% or so, but our numbers are very comparable. So one thing I thought was interesting that's probably worth pointing out, because the typical impact hour awarded varied so much, there was actually this period where the retweets got a very high impact hour value, period 14, and that was worth more than meetings in some other periods. So of the ones that I looked at, there were about 400 meeting-related praises that did not get as many impact hours as the retweet praise, the highest retweet praise. And that's about 40%. Hold on, I need to keep my phone plugged in, Addie. That's about 40% of the, yeah, so there were about 40% of meetings that did not get as many impact hours as the highest retweets, which I thought was interesting because people were pretty clear that they thought meetings was worth more than retweets. It turns out it wasn't always. And that's, I think, the big insight I have to share on that. One more thing I want to say, Sean, I think you are using a different data set than I was for my Gini coefficient analysis. So my Gini coefficient was a little bit higher, but I think you have more data than I did. So we can reconcile that when we get a chance, but I did want to point it out in the interest of clarity.
Yeah, that's a good idea. We'll have to have a session where we just cross-reference results and make sure we're using the same data. There have definitely been a few different data sets used, and yeah, so maybe we can make a standard, like, final, if we can get the latest data, and then just say, okay, this is what we're using for the we can run that data set through all of our analysis results and get kind of like the final result.
That sounds good.
Yeah, thanks so much, Octoupus and Sean, for sharing all of this. I wanted to, maybe we have time for a couple of questions. I wanted to address the one Angela asked in the agenda, if we have a comparison between average impact hours for retweets and for other categories. So there is this chart that Mohammed posted yesterday that has like the results of the categorization. So how many impact hours are going for each category. So I think the participation in retweets was the highest one, and that's why Octoupus was looking deeper into it. Do you guys want to add something to this?
Yeah, I just want to add. First, I think I really want to also emphasize on how awesome it is that praise worked this well, right? That we have such a great distribution. And this is not based, yeah, let's have an applause, because I think this is so amazing that we have, it's a great mechanism, obviously. And I think what's also great is that I think we have some kind of standards where you can count contributions like retweets, but then we have very subjective recognition and praising, and I mean I think when beginning praise, we couldn't be sure if this will work out well because of group dynamics and subjective preferences and bias towards tech or bias towards social interaction. So you never know. And to have such a distribution is just awesome. What my question with the average impact hours is rather what I don't have a clear picture at the moment is first, this comparison is really valuable to see, okay, how does retweet in impact hour or result in impact hours, and compared to that, attending a meeting. This is very well measurable, both activities. And I think my feeling about this is, yes, here retweets are overvalued compared to taking part in meetings. But yeah, this should be a matter of discussion as well. Now, looking at other categories, I think it's worth taking a look not only in the overall impact hours, so the total amount. This provides a first picture, right? But then I think we have to take into account, okay, what was actually happening in a specific period. And I don't have this overview, but many impact hours can be a result of a lot of activities in a particular category. Like, just as an example, there was the launch of a particular component that was delivered and deployed or tested. And of course, there you have a lot of impact hours spent into these activities, tech infrastructure or comms. And so I think it's perhaps not enough to look at the total amount for comparison and then to see if it's over or undervalued. But overall, I think having this comparison is super valuable to get a picture on what was praised and how we valued it, and how does this result in then the hatch and decision-making power. That's awesome.
Sean or Octoupus, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think it would be a lot of the results can be combined. I mean, it would be interesting to have like double the. I feel like this is like a phase 1 of the research. It'd be awesome to have a phase 2.
Yes.
Yeah, and because we could see in relation, like, okay, we have like the dashboard I was showing, we have the distributions, but could we map those distributions to these? Like, could we color the distribution chart by category and see where that falls? Like for kind of combining people with categories. So if we could say of the people who have been involved in various categories, where do they sit along that curve of the distribution? And then looking at time too, I think Angela, you mentioned like how have, this is just a snapshot, right? But how have a lot of these, maybe there was 1 month where tweets got half of these total impact hours. Maybe there was 1 month we were all just going crazy on praising tweets because we wanted to get the message out. And so yeah, it'd be really interesting to see how these transform over time. It's kind of puts us in a hard place because, like, especially as a data scientist and as a technologist, I see like, wow, we could get so many more cool results. But there's been a lot of voices of reason of like, don't let this be a blocker, and you got to launch the hatch. And there's going to be a lot of insights, and it'll be interesting to see that if the community pursues any sort of retroactive interventions or augmentations, because I think we have the power to do so. Maybe there'll be a little bit of technical investment on understanding how to do things exactly, but I think we could do a retrospective UBI, for example. It's possible given the parameters of like the Dandelion DAO. I have, my intuition says probably we won't do that. I think maybe we'll do some interventions beforehand. We'll get to augment the impact hour data set, or maybe we won't do any interventions, and that's okay if that's what gets voted on. But it would be really interesting to see if there's any sort of retroactive action that happens as well, given future insights, or maybe just changes to the praise. I think the praise system is so great. It's such a critical contribution to this world to token engineering, to decentralized collaboration. And so just having everyone exposed to all these insights and getting to reflect and incorporate this into future builds is really, but yeah, that was kind of just a rant, but
That was
Yeah,
great.
also,
And I think
I wouldn't want to, let's say, make this a blocker to the hedge. Not at all. It's rather better understand what happened and maybe see the sensitivities in this praise phase, so that we are aware of there might be a bias towards tweets, or just in case we don't do any intervention, there might be a bias towards tweets. How can we avoid this in the future, or how can we shape the upcoming phases accordingly? Yeah, that's my motivation. It's not making this a blocker. It's just so exciting to get insights based on this data. It's amazing.
yay. And I think this is a good segue to talk about the decision-making process, how this is going to work, how we can move forward, and then we'll open the floor for discussion. So we are choosing to do something very similar to what we did with the mission, vision, and values voting session, and also the params voting session to choose the hatch configuration. Mainly because most of you that are here are familiar with this process already, and using token log, we are allowed to have a whole perspective of the stakeholders, and quadratic voting can help us mitigating some of the issues we were thinking of. Some people have like, how can we make a decision about the praise distribution using the current token distribution as a way for voting into it? So we debated that a lot. and we came to the conclusion that quadratic voting would really help us here, and that we should take a chance on using it. So I made this forum post to explain how is this going to work, and I'm just going to go over it really quick. So we go to token log, and here you can click on new issue and a template will pop up. And then in this template, you see a few questions. And these questions are about the problem set that we have identified and some of the things that people brought up and most of the things that were addressed during the analysis. So number one, the reason why we chose to do this yes or no for the first 4 questions is to help the voter. Like whenever you're coming here and you're reading these questions and just yes or no, you can have a sense of what is coming in the proposal. So maybe if you don't agree with number 1 or 2, then you don't even need to read the full thing, because we know it's a time-consuming process. So we want to have the most agile system possible. So number 1, does this proposal address that some categories may be under-rewarded and others over-rewarded? That is the case. We were just talking about the tweets and the meetings, for example. Number 2, does this proposal address that paid contributors have had a 50 to 85% reduction to their total number of impact hours? So would you like to address something like this in your proposal? Number 3, does this proposal address the foundational members of the token engineering community may lack recognition for their less visible work? So also something very important that started this whole discussion is token engineers have been doing work for years, and is this work have been recognized by the praise system? And is your proposal going to tackle this issue? And then number 4, does this proposal address the distribution of impact hours in relation to equality metrics such as Gini coefficient, like Sean explained in the beginning? So those are the problem sets that we are proposing having solutions for. So if, depending on the questions you answered yes, you would propose the interventions for them. And what is the reasoning behind it? If someone wants to propose having no interventions at all and mark no in all of them, you can also propose that and just share your reasoning for doing that. So I just wanted to quickly show Griff's proposal. Griff apologized that he wasn't able to be in this meeting. And if someone wants to see an example of how this was done, you can go over his proposal. That it's very detailed for the solutions he's suggesting, and the proposing and voting session is open, so anyone can come and create a new issue. And we are willing to finish this process on the next Tuesday at this time during the Softgov meeting, and we'll go over it to prepare for the runoff. So like we had in the other sessions, unless, where is the forum post? Here, unless a proposal has more votes than all the other proposals combined, then it is the clear winner. Otherwise, we'll have a session to prepare the top 3 to 4 submissions for a runoff vote. And this runoff will last until the following Thursday. So we are willing to finish this voting process on July 1st. Of course, if we need more time, if we see that it wasn't enough, that we didn't have proposals or votes enough, we can extend, but we're really trying to think about the timing and the momentum for the hatch and have this moving. So the hatch would happen around 3 days after these proposals are settled and the interventions are applied to our process. So with this, I want to...
Can I ask just a quick clarifying question?
Yes.
On the voting, so you're saying there's 1 week to submit a proposal, and voting starts immediately for the first round.
Yeah, so we would expect to have most of the proposals coming like right after this meeting or in the next couple of days, since we have this information fresh and we are seeing all of this today. And hopefully we can propose quicker rather than later. And it's always a good practice to vote towards the end of the voting session on token log, because what if a new proposal comes, there's no way to retract a vote. So hopefully we would have the voting happening, let's say from Thursday to Tuesday, but votings can happen at any time. So in an ideal perfect scenario, proposals would come, all of them, until Thursday. But if people want to submit later, it's also fine until Tuesday. And then most of the heavy voting happens from Thursday to Tuesday.
I would just say, I think, if I know you can't like stop people from voting, but I feel like having a set time would be better that all the proposals are in. But I guess it's up to everyone to discuss. But I feel like that could make sense.
Yeah. So that would be great if all proposals are there until Thursday, and we can have a collective effort to make that happen and have all the votings Tuesday. And if we feel like we absolutely need to delay this process, then we can. And I want to pass around, so we'll have 1.5 minutes for who wants to share. So share what you're thinking in general. What are some of the solutions you can see happening, or anything you would like to bring to the circle? And Juan will help me with the timing. Since we have limited time, I think it will be good to have the clock help. So anyone who wants to start, feel free. Yes, Katie?
I just really wanted to hear, I think YGG said that Jeff, is going to talk about other, I don't know what the right term was, matrices or mechanisms for measuring the data that is different from the Gini coefficient, because I find the Gini coefficient to be completely irrelevant, like utterly irrelevant to this data set. So I was wondering what those other possibilities might be. And am I wrong? Was that not Jeff?
Yeah, that was Octoupus. I was looking into that. So Octoupus, maybe you want to speak a little.
Yes, I posted a video. It's long, but I used so there was a recent paper on decentralization of Bitcoin and Ethereum that was published at an IEEE network conference. I used the same metrics they did, which were the Gini coefficient, entropy, Shannon entropy, then something they called the Nakamoto coefficient, and then I also threw in what percentage of the resources were held by the top certain percentage of the population. I have no opinion on the Gini coefficient. I used it because in the discussion that was originally had, someone asked, what does the Gini coefficient look like for this data set? And I just went down and tried to answer the questions one after the other.
No, I didn't. Sorry, I didn't mean to criticize, but I guess I'll use my 1.5 minutes just
No,
to
you're
say that I
fine.
feel like it. Yeah. Go ahead.
I just have no opinion as to its suitability.
So I'll just say my reflection really quickly is I think, it'd be great to look at that video and those different mechanisms, because something about using that kind of measurement for, precisely. And I'm not familiar with any of those, but just my immediate reaction is it's going to give a pretty skewed perspective on a community where you do have compensated and not compensated more members who, and YGG, you did address that briefly, saying that, of course, once you add those reduced impact hours for compensated individuals, it's going to change precisely because you're getting it now, these increased numbers for people who are participating the most, obviously, but that is not indicative of the economy of the entire community. I don't know if that makes sense. I'm going to try and articulate myself better in the agenda. Thanks.
I also want to share something, and it's that I think that praise is a very adaptive system, and that I loved the idea on Griff's proposal, where he said that we could have like a TE Rockstar praise session. I think that can also be really good. That instead of changing the data, adding some for the TE Rockstars and making this a special praise session for them. Punctually for the speaking for the topic of the TE Rockstars that are not so much praised.
Just a clarifying question. So if those TE Rockstars then don't join the association, you're gonna burn those impact hours again. Have you accounted for that? Like, do you know that those TE Rockstars, before you do the effort, maybe, yeah, just check. Or don't burn the impact hours and do something else useful for the community with those by putting an equal amount into some proposal bin or something like that. So just a comment or question if that is already included.
I can probably address that question quickly. So using the Common Stack Swiss Association and being part of the Trusted Seed was the fundraising strategy that was chosen to the TEC during the legal meetings, and there was a lot of discussion and documentation shared around that. We did have that discussion after you asked that question, and I think it is too late to open exceptions to a process that has been very, like, there's a lot of people working in that process and making it welcoming for everyone who wants to participate, so offering scholarships and helping in the step-by-step. But also, it wouldn't be fair to the people that have joined for a legal shield to have someone that is in the hatch, that is the fundraising period, without that legal shield. I think there are some there could be some dangerous implications for all the members that are choosing a certain strategy. But I'm happy to talk more about that out of this meeting, also to keep the discussion focused on praise.
Yeah, then the comment would be basically, or my 30 seconds then would be, especially if you're trying to go quick about this, if the agreed upon strategy is to burn the tokens, maybe you don't need to do extra work to account for the impact hours. Yeah. Because, I mean, for me, it is very clear, you know, what was the weighting, etc. Because we were focused on hatching and getting the token engineering commons or the common stack infrastructure off the ground. It was very clear that the whole efforts to build the community culture, etc., around it, are weighted for this phase, right? And it makes total sense. If you look at the data from that point, it can even make sense that at times retweeting was more effective for getting a bigger community engagement than, especially around important activities, etc., was more important to build a community of hatcheries, etc., or get attention than, for example, participating in working groups in the beginning, etc. So saying it doesn't look that off for me, knowing what was near-term focus of tech and hatching. Yeah, and before you go and do extra work, maybe really clarify whether that will have the impact what you're trying to do, create with those interventions.
Thanks, Shannon. Would anyone else like to jump in? Yeah, Jeff?
Cool. Yeah, I've got to run in a moment here, so would love to have a chance to speak for a little bit. So I think the praise system when we first started, was a great way to recognize contributions across the board. I think, looking back, I don't think there's anyone in this community who worked, 20 times harder than anyone else, at least among the engaged participants. So I find the distribution a little bit tricky because I understand there are people who took pay and people who didn't. I think the 85% was probably a little extreme. Looking back, of course, at the time, we were just picking a number. We thought, hey, there's a number and we can adjust it in the future. We never adjusted it in the future. This is potentially an opportunity to adjust that moving forward, both in the future or pre-hatch as the community decides. I do kind of think there are some kind of like ways to game this. Like if I look back, I would say, okay, from Octoupus's analysis, joining a call per week for 4 months and doing a couple of retweets would get me the majority of my impact hours over doing all of the things that I did. I find the praise system a little bit tricky because you have to do, it's not just the work, it's also kind of like bragging about the work or like showing the work or sharing the work or making sure you get recognized for the work. And for people who aren't either A, in all the calls, or B, engaging with the people who are giving praise, which primarily happens in TEC calls. This is, I think, the bulk of the work that kind of got missed by in that praise kind of perception. And that's one of the things that I really want to make sure that TEs are at least as well represented as we can get them in this list, because I think TEs are critical to the TEC moving forward. And it's sort of this, recognition, breeding goodwill, breeding more projects, breeding, we grow the pie together. We can subdivide the pie and say, hey, I deserve this much and you deserve that much. But I think that's a zero-sum game. I think the real win-win here is growing the pie together. And ultimately, if we are willing to, recognize those things, that the praise system is not perfect, period. And I've been with it for quite a while, and I feel like I haven't had the time to engage with sort of the song and dance of like getting recognized for your work, as opposed to like heads down doing the work, which I think is also effective and impactful and really important for people to be doing that. And that's one of the reasons I brought this up, was I saw several prominent names on the list that I think should be at a, recognized and remunerated with governance in this community. Yeah. So anyway, I don't want to go. I think I already went over my time, so I will hand over the floor to whoever would like to speak.
I gotta jump too for our research calls. Sadly, I didn't even realize that there was a conflict. Okay, so I just share a little bit of experience in saying, I mean, number one, want to express gratitude for all the work that's been done. Just Sean, Octoupus, Muhammad, you guys are just blowing the whole socks off. I don't know. I don't have the right analogy, but this is amazing, especially for the future of token engineering. So the work here is incredibly valuable. And I don't know, I realized yesterday, I don't know any other community that could handle this with such grace. So I've been really impressed with how we've been able to turn this into something productive. But I'll just share a little bit of my experience, I guess, that I've been having realizations throughout this process. I also have been on all sides. I've done the praise quanting. I started with Livia and Griff in this community last July or August and watched this whole thing unfold. And I had questions throughout that I didn't really raise. And then I started to realize quickly when we looked into things, and even myself, like I was a core contributor, I was inside, I was pushing from all directions, and I was very visible. So I was getting praise loads and I was very high on the list. And now, because I've moved a lot of my work into token engineering research, suddenly, and I don't mind for my personal sake, I'm just using myself as an example, suddenly I'm not, as visible. So I've seen this shift that Jeff is kind of talking about. And I think for me too, when we originally started back in August of last year, we had started with this intention that we needed to push, I guess, some of the contention early on was rewarding higher for building the TEC versus TE work. And we said, okay, we're going to start now because we have to start this commons, this DAO, we have to reward higher, but at some point we'll shift. And I feel like that point never really came, or this is the point now to then, okay, the house has been built, and then rewarding as well some others. So I just feel like now's the opportunity to make that shift. And the last thing I'll say is just that for me, looking at the distribution of the buckets, I feel wouldn't be, the ideal for me. So I don't know if there are some other considerations for normalizing or applying average for standard IH awards. Like even, Sean and Octoupus were presenting, even the same actions had a lot of variation. So maybe there's some adjustments we can apply there as well, and based on categories. And then finally, Sean had mentioned that we were not affecting the order or ranking. And I know this is probably the most contentious part, but I don't think we can say that everyone's in agreement with that. I'm not sure how to address this. I also had an idea to offer universal basic gifting praise to where we give everybody 25 impact hours that they have to give away and that they can reward to people who they feel were undervalued in the system. So that was one potential idea. But anyway, thanks for listening, and I'm hoping that we'll see some interesting proposals and ideas coming together to find a solution around this, and especially in supporting people who felt their work or the work of some were undervalued. And that ultimately, I loved what you wrote, like ultimately we're here for the collective and not for personal gain or the individual. So I hope we can look past our own desires, and that we're able to think of this as sharing rather than taking from anyone. And I would happily give away all of my hours, and brought this up the other day. I wish I could gift some hours to people who I feel have been undervalued. So I hope we can all keep this in mind as we go through this process. And I'll pass on to whoever wants to speak next.
Yeah, I'll go next. Because I think I have some points that are related and awesome. I really appreciate both Jeff and Jessica with all those really good points. I think the gifting praise is awesome. Like, I think that should be a proposal. I don't know how it would be implemented exactly, but maybe it's doable and maybe think it through. I was going to say, I love the Rockstar idea too. Like, we should all just take this very seriously and have an hour one day or whatever, and we all just think about, just have some discussions and dish praise. Everyone's just like dishing praise constantly to the unseen work that has happened. Because I think all of us probably can picture someone in our head where we can see, oh yeah, that thing that person did was so grateful, like so impactful to the community, and it's probably undervalued. But the beautiful thing about this is we don't need to augment the system. We can actually use the system as it is to fix this. We can jump in and we can just dish. We can dish, and dish praise before the hatch. And so that's one pretty cool proposal where we don't have to, there's no technical solution. We just like hammer the system with praise. So that, like, the Rockstar idea and the gifting idea, I think are both really cool solutions. I think that the wage deductions should be completely compensated with governance. So I really like the idea of infinite vesting tokens, like tokens that you can't trade. So they essentially have no monetary value, but they represent governance in the system. So I'll put forward, or I'll look forward to seeing some sort of proposal that maybe a combination. So maybe 85% deductions was too much for the paid workers. So maybe sliding that down to 10% deductions is probably something that's quite reasonable. Maybe 60%, I don't know. And then also a prospective future where those tokens are maybe 100% is actually too much. I don't know, like to have this sort of purely governance, infinitely vested token that offsets that. But I think the stewards having governance influence for the work that they've done and the commitments they've made is an important concept. So I like that infinite vesting tokens. I like the slider on moving away from the 85% extreme. I really like the gifting and Rockstar ideas. And I think I'll like to see, so I think a little bit of UBI, like I definitely think like 2 hours UBI to everyone is better than 0. And I don't know how high we would want to go with that, but I would like to see something like that. And the Gaussian is cool. So a combination of those, I would be happy to champion a proposal or work together with someone on those things. And yeah, those are all my thoughts. Yep. Thanks, everyone.
I just want to quickly comment that that's Griff's proposal to give infinite vesting of 75% for all the paid contributors. So if anyone is curious, you can see his proposal. And I pass to someone that wants to speak.
I would like to make only a short comment, and it's about the boundary of being a TE, because like we have been told, and we have always talked about that token engineering is a transdisciplinary field, and I think that there is still a bit of this border of like some TEs not recognizing the value of the transdisciplinarity that other people have added to this ecosystem. And yeah, I mean, why can I not be a TE if I am working for the token engineering ecosystem and adding value that is not the typical TE work, or it's not like one of the most developed petals of the flower, but is coming from other petals of the flower that shouldn't be considered less than the work that is like hard TE work, that is like around systems and framework and around tools. But I also think that there should be a lot of importance around the transdisciplinarity and of TE. That's it.
Hello everyone. I just want to comment on something, which is basically the idea of that only. I mean, I don't think that only TE people are the only ones that could be unrepresented. There are people who are in the cultural build that could be also unrepresented. So I think the scope of just thinking token engineers are the only ones unrepresented here, it's a little bit not accurate. Besides that, I think the work, it's amazing. I will look forward to sort of see more of the data that comes eventually down the road, and sort of it will be nice to have kind of work in progress timeline where we can see how this data praise or this praise system gets updated every certain amount of time, or like having these tools that WGG created to sort of having this feedback or this loop of feedback along the way during the hatch, after the hatch, or whatever, just to give example of transparency in the praise system, that we are not we don't take it for granted, and we will keep evolving this tool for everyone else too. So I think it will be really nice to see the work in progress and how it evolved and what other data would come from it. That's my 2 cents on this.
So as a rule, I try not to create work for others, but I was going to ask Sean or Octoupus, is it possible to submit a token lock proposal via the dashboard with the parameters that we choose?
It's not so built in like it was for the params, but you can just you can take open up the dashboard and configure it and take a screenshot. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I was just curious. Thank you.
I'd like to share like my high level thinkings about this, because I guess many people have come about with fantastic ideas to make this system fairer, or to move it towards a better understanding for what the T Commons was trying to do. So I think that someone who wasn't there when was this, we could say, this meeting committee, who decided a little bit what the praise system was being built for. I think in that thinking, you were trying to take into account like this was evolutionary, and you wanted to praise things that were valuable and intangible as well. So I think with a middle intervention, this would be like work out. I guess the things that Angela mentioned as well are very useful. So you are obtaining what you were trying to do from the very beginning. So this is like mechanistic as well, and like little tweaks in this middle class stakeholders would do, even if it's like something general. You give 20 to 30 impact hours from the very beginning to all these middle stakeholders that Sean was trying to say this word. Maybe the people who aren't rewarded in this with the Gini coefficient, that is not applicable to this, I think, at all. But even we can have this useful criteria. And I would warn towards the future, because if we are saying, okay, retweeting are being overweight in this criteria, we are setting a precedent. So maybe for more people to come here and say, okay, we can hack this in a civil way, and say we can put a bot here, and or my retweets are the same as participating in calls, which I don't think is very fair in this regard. So be aware of that. And yeah, the vesting, infinite vesting, is a good idea from my view, and coming up with something intermediate, I guess. So yeah, let's hope there is a proposal which is fair for everyone. And so Sister said, which is also very interesting, like if you are trying not to burn the tokens from the very beginning for the hatch, for the token engineers, that would be useful as well, to have these tokens in a kind of a cage in a store, and say, okay, this is the actual value, and after the hatch, this can be rewarded as well. Those are my thinkings.
Cool. I'll add a few things to the discussion too. So I want to talk about the boundaries of TE. I think that it's a very good point, but I don't think that was the intention of the original discussion. I think it was more around seen versus unseen work, and more about the work that's very visible to the community because we're participating. It's highly participatory, so that we're on the calls, in the Discord, on top of everything, having one-on-one syncs, versus the work that's invisible in some regards, except for these, very rare moments in time. And I think this discussion really originated around this invisible, unseen work that is extremely impactful, but is not perhaps being recognized as much as the seen, visible work is. And then for the deduction for the compensated contributors, you know, I already did advice process with both Common Stack and previous Softgov around my thinking, which is the 85% deduction of impact hours made sense in the very beginning of this project, where there was 2 or 3 people who started it, and they were all compensated by Common Stack. So as the community, so they were very visible, very present, and it would have been to the detriment of the community had those people had their entire impact hours credited to them that they've earned. So it sort of made sense in the very beginning. But as time went on and as more community members joined and also had positions of high visibility, it started to make less and less sense. And it never was actually adjusted to the changing environment of the people that were compensated. And then I guess the also thing I wanted to say about the compensation, I mean, I have a separate proposal that's completely independent of this about how we should adjust praise going forward, and my proposal would be just to get rid of it, actually. It falls too wide. People who are compensated but really work on other projects entirely or are not even in the TEC are also deducted for their participation in the when they do participate in the TEC. They also have an 85% reduction, even though they're not visible in the TEC or they don't do a lot of work here. And then the last thing is it doesn't really take into consideration people's unique circumstances. You know, there are people who actually just need to have even such a modest compensation as 100 DAI a day in order to be able to work. And we're somehow not even factoring that into the equation. And I think that's perhaps a mistake on our part to continue forward with that.
Does anyone else has something to share? Sam, perhaps?
Well, I had a question. Didn't we have another dashboard that Mohammed did?
Yeah, it's linked here. It's the praise analysis dashboard.
There's another one. There's actually another.
Oh.
I like that so much. So
yeah.
I was thinking, are they going to present it or not? Any state of this? Wasn't it ready for this call or?
Yeah, we should have. I think Libby just missed it. Plugging it in the agenda.
Okay. And regarding the interventions, my thoughts are that the praise impact hours are earned impact hours. So for me, it wouldn't have sense to apply a Gini coefficient because it doesn't represent how inequal is TE. It's how much people have been working on TE. So in that sense, I don't know. I still don't have a clear opinion. I will tend to not intervene because in a real economy you cannot intervene, and if you're trying to intervene, it probably bad things happen. Imagine, for example, that we already have an open bonding curve. You cannot just create tokens from nowhere, because in case that you create a vote to create those tokens, that breaks the prices, that breaks a lot of things. So I would not like to create a culture that intervenes the economy. So from my perspective, I will try not to do great interventions that breaks how things have been doing. In that sense, I like the idea of doing more praise to people using the same system, or even giving impact hours that I probably would like to give impact hours to people who I think that are not represented enough. For example, I will give impact hours from myself to Paulo and to other people that I think that are too low. But if we create new impact hours in order to do that, then in some way it's creating new impact hours, which breaks the status, how it has been working. I don't know. There are two ways: or creating new impact hours, or give impact hours that you already have and you think that could be better distributed. I will try to put down all these ideas in one proposal and see if they make sense to people.
Sounds good. Anyone else would like to say something?
Sean or Sam, can you explain the new link that you added? I just opened it and I don't understand anything.
Yeah. So it's too bad we missed this one while Mohammed was here. But, let's take a look. So this is a clustering. So on the left, over on the left, just take a look at the toggles for the drop downs. At the top left, there's the x-axis, the y-axis. Yeah, so let's try a day of week. See what it looks like. Okay, so what are we doing? So this is a clustering. So I'm pretty sure this is the algorithmic approach. So let's say we have every day of the week, and we have the average amount of impact hours per praise goes from 0 to 1 hours, it looks like. And then we have a grouping. So it's kind of hard to read this, but you have to spend some time with it and squint, and you can start to see different days of the week and just different properties. So we can see from this one that Sunday has the highest average impact hours given per praise. So that seems pretty interesting. But then Octoupus made a good point that we need to be careful of what we see and not get too attached to it, because praise is typically quantified on Saturdays, and which means, how did Octoupus say this? That there could be a tendency to make adjustments on Sundays. Does this make sense actually to the praise quantifiers? Would there be adjustments made on Sundays?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So Octoupus was saying probably things that get adjusted are getting increased. And so there would be some association between that and why it looks like Sunday has the highest average. It could be that, or it could be that higher praise is given on Sunday. So it's hard to buy into this too much and make conclusions, but we can see some interesting things, like there's a bimodal distribution for Friday, which shows that there is this very large cluster, and then there's a smaller, higher cluster in the 0.6 and 0.7 range. And so this is just kind of a tool for people to play around with and try all the different variables. And when you see the colors here, these are automatic clusterings. So everything in green, for example, cluster number 3 at the top, the algorithm that we used found that those praises have similar properties. And those properties are a combination of the day they were praised on, the amount of praise that was given, and then let's see what it says on the left. Description: k-mean tag is based on average percent and impact hour per praise. So that's the color. So actually try that one at the top. The third drop down is the color. So change that to day of week. see what that does. Okay. Okay, so we can change all the axes. So then go up to the x-axis and change that. Yeah, so you can basically slice and dice the data. This enables you. So if we have all day of week, then this is just a zero-dimensional. We just have colored boxes because they're all the same axes. But yeah, am I out of time?
No, just a question. Like you mentioned on Fridays, could it be possible, for example, that's due to Ivy posting the praise from the community calls on Friday, and that's why we have a huge cluster on Friday?
Yep, exactly. So there's we have to be aware of that. There's patterns in just how in the system it's like meta patterns in the system of how the praise is distributed that will affect these distributions. That's a good point. So yeah, this is a pretty cool. I think everyone on this call, I'm sure, if you spend a few minutes tinkering with this, like trying different axes and looking at the colors, you'll probably see some insights. So yeah.
That's so awesome. Oh, I am sad that we missed it in the beginning of the call. But thanks for going through it now. And we are on the top of our scheduled time. Thanks a lot for everyone who joined. I know the sharing moment is tricky, is hard to make sense of all of this at once sometimes, but I hope we can put our thoughts into a proposal. And as soon as we have like a couple or 3 proposals, I'll start hosting debates, and then we can start comparing the proposals and opening the rationale from them, and hopefully will help in our voting decisions too. So thanks all for joining.